Today, we are looking into the controversy over the South African refugees that have recently been accepted into America and what the situation over in South Africa actually looks like. I'm your host, JD Walter, and this is episode number 53 of the American Regularis Podcast. Before we get into all the wild details about what is actually going on in South Africa, please do me a favor, like and subscribe, hit the like button, tell your friends. Really want to get my subscriptions up. Anything you can do to help on that. And, all right, I trust you already did it. Thank you so much. Let's get into it. So, the controversy, or at least one of the controversies of the week, is that Trump and the Trump administration have recently let in a group of 59 white South Africans. They've arrived in the U.S. where they are to be granted refugee status. Now, South Africa is not majority white. We can go over the history in just a moment, if for those of you who are unfamiliar. But race will play a key role in a lot of this discussion and controversy today. President Donald Trump has said that the refugee applications for the country's Afrikaner minority, and when I say Afrikaner, not African, that will denote white citizens of South Africa. Right? That it's been expedited as they were victims of racial discrimination. Okay, now, the South African government said that the group were not suffering any such persecution. Now, let's not take their word for that quite yet. We're going to take a look into it for ourselves, but you can always be sure. I don't know that I've ever heard of a government that's like, no, we are absolutely persecuting these people. You guys should, go take us to international court. Let's do a brief history, real quick, for those of you that don't know about South Africa, the history of the country of South Africa. The Afrikaners is a name that was basically given to primarily Dutch farmers and colonists that settled in South Africa. I think there were French Huguenots as well. Later, the British come and take over. But the language is related to Dutch, and it's called Afrikaans. And I don't know if you could debate whether it's even a Dutch dialect or if it's its own language. I'm not an expert on that. But it's a Germanic language from Europe. And the Dutch were, back in the day, known as Boers, Boers. If you hear about the Boer Wars between the English and the Boers, obviously, Winston Churchill was famously, I think he was a journalist down there during that time. So if I use the word Boers, which is like the German Bauer equivalent, it just means farmer, more or less. If I use farmers, Boers, or Afrikaners, it's all pretty interchangeable to let you know that we're talking about white citizens, European descended citizens of South Africa, right? Now, that being said, these guys are a minority and were, for the most of the part, a ruling minority. So most of you guys have at least heard of apartheid, which was the system during the 20th century and possibly before, where I don't know when they exactly say apartheid started. I assume it started when they had power and brought in more areas with larger groups of black Africans. But apartheid was a pretty brutal, structural or systemic, there's actual systemic racism. There was a class division of people. And that all ended in 1994. Now, what is a good thing to not have a systemically racist system? Things have not necessarily been there's been problems since 1994, a new series of problems, and it's getting much, much worse for the Afrikaners as it goes in. And I would also say it's not going particularly well. I'm sure they're happy apartheid's done, but it's not exactly a pony ride for any of the various different ethnic groups of black Africans in South Africa as well. So, why are these Boers or Afrikaners, why are they wanting to come to America? They're claiming they're being basically persecuted due to race. I think it would be the since 1994, the government of South Africa has been ran by a single party called the African National Congress, the ANC. They've dominated South Africa's politics ever since apartheid ended. It's the ruling party. Now, they would say it's not based as much about race and based more on economic status because they're socialists. And I think their race is socialist, but they would make it a socioeconomic issue, and that can be kind of more or less the same because there is still a disproportionate amount of wealth towards for the Afrikaners as compared to black Africans in South Africa. This has led to a lot of legislation, a lot of court rulings, and a lot of just different government actions that have kind of been a boiling pot. Frogs in a boiling pot. It's just been getting a lot hairier over time for these Afrikaners. And more recently, there has been a bill that was passed for farmland appropriation without compensation. Right now, in America, in most places, the government has some sort of eminent domain where they can appropriate your land and take it for the interest of national security or state affairs or whatever it is that they claim they need it for. But you're supposed to be duly compensated in a just manner. Now, it's not just if you have no say on whether the transaction actually happens or not, but to what a state or a government might call just, right? You're supposed to be fairly compensated. In South Africa, they said, no, we can take your land and you can get nothing and you'll like it. And I remember listening earlier to a guy named Ernst Roost, something like that. He was either on Tucker Carlson. I watched him on several things, maybe Tom Woods. And he was talking about, he asked the question, or another guy asked the question to the government. They're like, well, what happens? So you take this land and you and they would redistribute it, right? Land redistribution, nice commie socialist concept that never works out. Ask the kulaks of Russia. But he said, well, what would happen if you appropriate this land from some Afrikaners? You distribute it, spread it out to some black African families, and then a few years later, they sell it to white Afrikaners. Like, okay, so now there's been some sort of social redistribution, and maybe we can look at this as some sort of economic restitution. So is it done then, or could they retake it from the Afrikaners that bought it from a black family? And the guys were like, well, yeah, we could, according to the law, we could take it again and redistribute it. So even if you lose your farm once, you can't buy a new one because you might just lose it again. Now, right there, I don't believe they've used it yet, but they might be waiting for the dust to settle from the fallout and the news of this happening before they start doing it. But just right there, you can see that there could be some political hardships due to a very small minority. And I do think, now, while they're no longer a political power, they are still economically much better. But I think when you're looking at minority statuses for refugee status on being discriminated, I don't know that you can really care if they are a very poor minority or a very rich minority. I think the ANC will argue, well, they have all this money, so it's a whole different thing, and therefore it's just like the DEI stuff where you can't be racist to a white person in America because they have the power. I think the ANC would kind of have the same line of thinking where, well, you can't actually, persecute them because they have more money. Now, we can take a look at a lot of places and see that wealthy minorities have been persecuted very much throughout history. Jewish people have been successful for thousands of years. They've faced persecution for pretty much the whole run of it at different points throughout it, right? So that can kind of fall on its face, and we're gonna look at just, well, let me preface this. There's a lot of people that are very up in arms that Trump's been kind of tightening the reins on refugee status because there are a ton of refugees coming into the U.S. all the time, and a lot of people that claim refugee status aren't probably really in this danger that I think you should have to prove to qualify as a refugee. There was a study done in, I want to say it was Scandinavia, where like 70% of it might have been Britain, but I think it was Scandinavia, or a Scandinavian country. It was like 70-some percent or 60-some percent of the refugees in that country would go on holiday, would go vacation in the country that they were fleeing from with their refugee status. So there's a lot of gamesmanship and corruption and stuff that goes on. And yeah, you do need a vetting process to see who would be a legitimate refugee or not. I think that's a prescient question to ask ourselves. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at these guys because there are a lot of people, and because it is racially tied, it is politically divisive, and so the right overall is in support of these guys coming over. I think they're getting located to Idaho mostly, so they should fit in. It's a bunch of farmers that will probably veer conservative, I imagine. And there's a lot of most of the people on the left are very up in arms about it. They say, oh man, Trump's reducing refugees, but he's going out of his way to bring in white refugees from South Africa, and they're not really refugees. You can go online and find all sorts of little clips of, blue-haired lefty ladies getting all up in arms about it. So I want to take a look, and I will tell you right away, I think it's a valid refugee status. Now, I think there are certain laws with refugees where they're supposed to go towards the nearest, plausible, appropriate country. You don't get to just go anywhere in the world because you're a refugee. So I don't know necessarily if, the U.S. is the best place for them, but I think you can make I'm going to show you evidence that I think it is fair to say that these guys should be able to claim refugee status. And before we get into that, just for reference, we're talking about 59 refugees so far. And look, this could be the first wave. There could be more. But for the year 2024, the United States admitted in 100,034 refugees. Now, 20% of them were from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. These are estimates, right? Afghanistan around 15%, Venezuela around 13%, Syria around 11%, Myanmar around 7.5%, Guatemala around 5%. Now, none of those countries make the list on places you want to vacation in, right? There's a lot going on. Venezuela, Syria, these places seem like a pretty good chance on being accepted in refugee status. Now, whether they should be coming into America, I would, again, just like the South Africans say, is this really the place that they need to come to? Shouldn't you be trying to find somewhere nearer? Maybe places where you homogenize with the culture better? I don't know. I don't even know if that's the case. But refugee status, I believe, was originally intended to just get you somewhere safe and figure it out from there. Not, hey, pick a destination and we'll put you wherever you want to go. So what that means for America, at least in this current controversy, is that the left is saying that Trump is a racist and he's just bringing in white people saying, who are rich white people. No one, crocodile tears for these guys. They've got it. They've got all this money, but they're the refugees of all the people in the world, and how dare he? And then the right saying, look, this is clearly racial discrimination, but you guys just don't recognize it as such because of social justice politics. And, you can't be racist against someone who has power, even though they're a political minority with very little representation. There is a political commentator, I believe he is from South Africa because he has a Dutch-sounding last name, named Stefan Grootz, who earlier was talking about Musk and Trump, who, keep in mind, Elon Musk is a South African that's very close to the president and who's been somewhat outspoken on X, although he talks about everything on X. about the crisis that's going on in South Africa. And this Stephen Groot says, South Africa is the embodiment of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we've talked about many times on this podcast. He said, of course Trump hates us. Now, I don't necessarily agree. I think they might be the embodiment of DEI because the South African government is a mess. All right? Now, that doesn't mean I would support the continuation of apartheid by any means, but what has replaced it has not been a successful government. They have widespread power outages routinely. They call it load shedding, where they have to shut stuff down or like the whole country's going to black out. There is extreme corruption, and their current or the most up-to-date unemployment rate I could see was 33%. Now, when you have an unemployment rate of 33%, you have no money in the government for infrastructure, power, roads, whatever. There are, different handles, different accounts on X that just show pictures of the degradation of buildings and infrastructure throughout South Africa. And South Africa, during apartheid, despite all those problems that were very abundantly clear, economically, they were, I think, the power of South Africa. I think they were the richest and most powerful. Now, you can be very rich throughout history without being a just government, right? Apartheid was wrong. Now historians love to talk about one African ruler in particular, like Mansa Musa, and they talk about how wealthy he was. He might have been the wealthiest man ever, right? Because he had like this large abundance of salt and gold mines, I believe, or salt and silver mines. I think it was gold and salt. But you just have to go ask one question. Who was pulling that salt and gold out of the ground, right? All his wealth was on slavery. So that doesn't mean it was just, but they love to look at him as a good guy. You don't have to look at the South African government before 1994. The apartheid government was not a good government, right? But this government now, and I won't even compare on if one's better or worse. They have these very distinct but separate issues, but they have lost their economic power. My comparison will not be on like which was worse, but economically, it's been a catastrophe for them in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the degradation of the quality of life in South Africa, and it is not improved. I would say, with the caveat that I think it has not improved, except notably the black Africans have been given more rights. So I should make that abundantly clear. Okay. And to let you know why I'm saying black Africans in comparison to Afrikaners or Boers, like I'm giving them more of a specific ethnic name, it's because it's not two tribes in Africa, right? It's not whites and blacks in Africa, right? You have the Boers or the Afrikaners or whatever you want to call them, and then maybe they're more than Boers now because there are some British and there's French Huguenots who were there, and there's a group that was called the Four Trekkers. I think they were mostly comprised of those groups earlier, but they ventured further east. There's a lot of people that claim that, a lot of the Europeans, the Boers, and that were actually in South Africa before the Bantus, who I think are one of the more majority tribes or ethnicities, I should say, in South Africa. They hadn't even got to South Africa yet, or at least the western part. I believe they were in, KwaZulu-Natal? I could be mispronouncing that. I have it on a map somewhere. Let me look it up. Yeah, KwaZulu-Natal, towards the east, Lesotho. I think the Bantus were over there first. But in the Western Cape, maybe parts of the Eastern Cape, I believe that in a lot of those, the Europeans are actually there before the Bantu-speaking people. Now, the Khoisan, which is a separate ethnicity, they were there before any of those guys, right? Those would be like the truly indigenous people to the area. And just the number of tribes. There's the Zulu, there's the Xhosa, and I can't even pronounce this, like XH, and I think there's like almost a click to it. The Khoisan noticeably have that in theirs. There's a ton. So when I say black Africans, it's not that I'm not giving them the proper ethnic endonym or anything like that. It's just, it is a catch-all because there are so many different ethnicities at play there. It's a very diverse country. Okay. So now we need to look at, is it justifiable to say that these Afrikaners should get refugee status, whether it be with the U.S. or elsewhere? And one of the things that they often talk about are something called farm murders, because the whites, the Afrikaners or Boers, they still have a disproportionate amount of the land being owned, which, like I said, any socialist is going to hate. And this has led to something known as farm murders. And since 1994, I don't know exactly how statistically perfect we're going to get with this, when you can't trust a government and when you can't trust statistics in general, but a pretty conservative looking one. Since 1994, which would be the end of apartheid, and when they talk about these farm attacks, there's a group called AfriForum. It's a South African civil rights group. They claim that there's been over 2,000 white farmers murdered since 1994. Now, kind of hurts to say it, but that's 1994 was 30 years ago. Doesn't make any of us feel younger that are listening to this. So that number annually is not going to be like wild, like it. So there's other statistics where they have a much higher number. I'm going with one that I saw as conservative. But these white farm murders or Afrikaner farm murders often have been used as saying, like, look, this is the motive. These farm murders, the motive is that they're Afrikaners with land and most likely more money, and that's what it's derived from. There's also a lot of I don't even know if you can say it on YouTube, and this will be going on YouTube, but the women and girls often face a different sort of brutality in those assaults on the farm, right? So, besides that, I think it would be important to say, okay, we've talked about how the Afrikaners are now, while they might still have a lot of money, they're a political minority. They don't have a lot of political power anymore. That's done primarily by the ANC, but there's a lot of different parties at play. Let's hear what some of these guys have said. And one of the most famous, and we're going to listen to clips of it later with along with a mashup of some other people talking, is there are stadiums full of people dressed all in red, pretending to have pistols or AKs in their hands, singing a song that basically translates. It's called like the Dubo Labunyu. Trust me, my Bantu languages are probably not the best. But it translates to kill the Boer, right? Kill the Dutch farmer. But it could also mean kill the Afrikaner, and it emerged in the 1980s, basically in opposition to the apartheid rule, right? I'm taking a lot of this information from an article I found on Al Jazeera. And the title of the song often also translated to kill the white farmer. The song essentially repeats the word shoot the Boer repeatedly and refers to them as cowards and dogs. Now, let's just do that game where we take out a couple of the names. Like James Lindsay at his best, he wrote that article where it was like a chapter from Mein Kampf or something, and he just replaced National Socialism with like radical feminism, and it got published. If we could just replace shoot the Boer with any other ethnic minority, take an ethnic minority in the U.S. and think about a song that said that, all right, and then referred to them as cowards and dogs, right? There's a lot of talk right now about anti-Semitism being on the rise in the U.S. There's always talk about racism towards Hispanic immigrants or African Americans. You take your pick on any of those groups, and this would be shocking to a society that doesn't get shocked real easy. Like, this would be bigger than Kanye's new album, whether we're talking about the Heil Hitler or the Cousins song, whatever. This would be right up there. We'd be like, what is going on? Who would sing this? This is terrible. And they've been singing it for 30 years, and they'll have a stadium, a political rally of thousands and tens of thousands of people chanting, kill the Boer, shoot to kill, bop, 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 right? And the people leading it are guys like former President Jacob Zuma, who was no longer with the ANC, but he was there. And then most famously is a member of the South African parliament named Julius Malema. Could be getting all these guys' names mispronounced wrong. I think I've got a pretty good grasp on Jacob, but maybe it's Julius, maybe it's Julius, who knows. So we're going to listen to some of these quotes that they've said. Keep in mind, they sing this song that, look, that seems to be pretty damning evidence when you have groups of 10,000 people singing a song about killing you and calling you dogs. However, the Supreme Court of Appeals of South Africa in 2024 ruled that a reasonably well-informed person would appreciate that when Mr. Malema, a member of parliament, sang Dubula Ebunyu, kill the Boer, he was not actually calling for the farmers or white South Africans of Afrikaans descent to be shot, nor was he romanticizing the violence exacted against them in farm attacks. Look, he's not romanticizing the murders of the farmers. He's not calling for it. He's just singing a song. It's basically like Ring Around the Rosie. You know, we're not calling for, it's just shoot the kill, shoot the Boer, shoot the farmer. They're cowards and dogs. They sing that with 80,000 people. It's catchy. It's a catchy tune. All right. It might as well have been Creedence. They might as well have been singing Looking Out My Back Door together. Like, it was like, to think that 80,000 or 30,000 people in a stadium singing kill and shoot the Boer, their dogs, to think or to extrapolate that would somehow have like some sort of ill intent, that they were romanticizing violence or that they were calling for violence. I mean, surely no one on the left in the U.S. would ever say there was, an incitement of violence because like a president said we're going to fight this or something. We would know that he wasn't actually inciting violence. Like, cooler heads would prevail. If we heard a song where there was like just thousands of people singing about murdering a group of people based on their race and occupation, like, we would know it's just a goof. Maybe it's a microaggression, but it can't be a microaggression because these guys have more money and they're white, so therefore you can't be racist towards them. So it's not even a microaggression, guys. So that's what it is. Julius Malema said, we're not calling for the slaughter of white people, at least for now. So even that just goes further to prove the point. He's not calling for the death of them. He said, not right now anyways, which proves that, when they're singing it, it's not about that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and roll into this clip. Some of the clips, it's a little mashup from a journalist named Daniel Hannan I found on X. People like Joseph Malema, who's a member of parliament and leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters. You'll be hearing his voice. There will be another member of parliament who I can't even begin to pronounce his name. And then there's a guy named Ronald Lamola, who's the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa. Well, that's a nice sounding kind of a peacenik type of title. So we're going to listen to these guys. You'll be able to figure out when it's the stadium chanting the song about killing the Boer and making gun noises. And there's some parts I have trouble hearing because they've got these thick South African accents, right? So listen to it and we'll go over what we hear.
I'm saying to you, we have not called for the killing of white people, at least for now. I can't guarantee the future.
We are just giving a warning to white South Africans that they must voluntarily bring back the land.
So these people, when you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain.
When you want to hit them hard, go after the white man. They feel a terrible pain.
We kill the children, we kill the women, we kill their dogs, we kill their cats, we kill anything.
We kill the men, we kill the women, we kill the cows and dogs, we kill anything or everything, something like that.
That come before.
Shoot to kill. Come on, sir.
And we can
That stadium looks like the size of any NFL stadium. It's huge, packed, full of people wearing political colors, singing a song, kill the Boer, kill the farmers.
no longer be able to guarantee the continued safety of Mr. van der Merwe.
We are cutting the throat of whiteness.
The land
Cut the throat of whiteness.
of our forefathers and our foremothers must return to our people without any fail and without any payment of compensation. And it must happen now.
All right, the guy calling for all the land to be returned without any compensation, that is the president or former president of South Africa.
Who will expropriate land without compensation, whether they like it or not. If they object, they can seek refugee in America.
Must never be scared to kill. A revolution demands that at some point there must be killing, because the killing is part of a revolutionary act.
So, that was Julius Malema at the end. Obviously, he's not talking about killing people now, but he says you can't be afraid of it because you have to kill during a revolution, which he might be generally right about that. But, for them to say there's no reasonable basis for guys saying we're not going to kill you, at least not for now. We can't fear murdering you. We need to slash the throat of whiteness. We're going to kill the men, women, dogs, cows. For all of that, and then groups, but I mean, let's trust the courts on this one, right? The, Supreme Court of Appeals. If you're a reasonably well-informed person, which I guess I'm not, because I can't appreciate that when Mr. Malema sings that song, he's not actually calling for farmers or white South Africans of Afrikaans descent to be shot, nor was he romanticizing the violence. I'm not an expert, right? That's kind of a big thing right now. But apparently I'm not even reasonably well informed, because I got to tell you, I guess I'm not quite a Gen Xer, but I feel more like I'm close to Gen X. I got to tell you, I feel like you can be racist to white people, especially in this case. So the microaggression or the you can't be racist to them because they were in a place of privilege or whatever, I don't know. That sounds pretty damn racist. And look, I'm not an Afrikaner. I'm not Dutch. I am of European descent. But I don't want to... I would find this disconcerting, because I'm not a racist or a racialist. I would find this to be pretty disconcerting for whoever you plugged in there, whether it was some tribe from the Amazon or whether it was the Han Chinese or whoever. If it was, we were calling it for it to be not even, it doesn't have to be across ethnic lines, right? It could be against people who's whatever, French-speaking Canadians. Let's go get them or whatever. Like anything like this should just raise the hackles of anybody who can sympathize with strangers, who can view other people as individuals and not some extremely tribalist thing, which is what this is. It is a more tribal land than us. Like us Americans, because there was such a large movement of different people, and the indigenous people died off through disease and conquest. And then there was this kind of Anglicization of so many people. We're just not a real tribal society. We also started to develop after. Like, it wasn't long until the rails and the roads and motor vehicles came in, and so we were able to move around more. We're just not as tribal of a society as so many different places, and it's kind of hard for us to square that with how we understand the world. This is a very tribalistic thing, and I don't think it's hard for us. Maybe it's easier for other people to see this as something more reasonable. But for us as Americans, like, how do we not see this? Where you put in any group, even a group with, I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable if they were saying this about, like, Nazis or what. Like, I would say, all right, well, can we not talk about killing them and shooting their women and cows and dogs and whatever else? Like, do you think we could maybe bring them into the fold and de-radicalize them or something? And like, And that's not what this is. This isn't a controversial group. This is just a minority. So yeah, they should get refugee status. There's no question about it in my mind. Now you can make the argument maybe they can go somewhere else. They're not going to go to Zimbabwe. Rhodesia's gone. This thing already happened in Rhodesia. There was a country similar to South Africa. There's European descent established. They were always a minority as well. I think at their height, they maybe had 500,000 to maybe 750,000. Maybe it was less. Maybe it was like 250,000 Rhodesians. And they had a country that was, again, kind of similar to the apartheid, but it was one of the economic powerhouses of the continent. And it was taken over by communists. And now there's a group of about 10 to 15,000 of them. So that sounds like some sort of displacement or else persecution that was so bad that they either had to flee or couldn't reproduce. Like something happened for, I think it was in the 60s, the early 60s or 50s when Rhodesia was falling, for them to drop in population so quickly, right? That seems like there could have been a refugee status there. We'll see how it goes. It should be a refugee status. There's a lot going on in the world right now. And stuff like this is just fascinating. We're still, for all the problems in America, it's still kind of shocking to us just because of how good we have it when we see stuff like this still going on. So I want to hear your takes on that. Remember, like and subscribe, tell your friends. If you liked this one, let me know. If there's something else you want me to do an episode on, you can email me at American Regularis Podcast at gmail.com, or, just follow me on Twitter at reg_American1. Shoot me a message. I'll get back to you on that. Leave a comment in the YouTube comments, podcast comments, wherever you're listening. Let me know what you think. All right. Peace.